Good evening and welcome to this Thursday, March 28th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Tonight we'll be following the published and posted agenda. It will also be both in person and through Zoom. Our first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of minutes from March 21st, 2024. Has someone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the meeting minutes from March 24th at 21 as presented, March 21.
March 21.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
6 in favor, Pam. All right, moving right along, we have a review of the fiscal year 25 budget for the Community Preservation Fund, along with discussion of Articles 23 and 24. With us this evening,
Linda was supposed
Linda
to
was.
come.
I don't see her in the audience. Darlene, if you don't mind, that would be fantastic. With us this evening, we have Darlene Lucier, our town accountant.
Good evening. I'm just going to review over the currently where we are with the fiscal 24 budget for CPC. I think everyone, I know I had sent it out to Kathy, and I hope the rest of the group did, but here it
I
is here.
sent it to everybody this
Okay,
afternoon.
good.
So whether they read it or not.
So the first page is always just all of the current projects that we have on the books. So we have, the first column is the brought forward balance from the previous year. And then we have, the next columns are the town meeting articles from last town meeting, from either spring or fall town meeting. Then we have any borrowings that we had, and then the total budget. Then we have what's spent through, this report is through February, the end of February. And then I also break out a line item in there for debt payments to actually see what the debt is for those projects, and then the available budget. So at this point in time, you can see there's, we had a balance brought over about $948,000. We had town meeting articles that totaled $527,000 for the projects. I put a borrowing in there for the bond proceeds. We haven't yet borrowed for that project. The finance team is in the midst of doing that. By June, we'll be getting that money in, and that was for the Coolest Farm, the purchase of that farm. So in total, the total budget was like $5.6 million worth of projects. To date, we spent 4.2 million of that. The bulk of that is the 4.1 million that we spent for the farm. We've made $35,000 worth of debt payments so far, leaving us $1.3 million available. So if anybody has any questions on these individual...
Linda's here, just so you know, behind you.
Oh, she's here. Oh, she's in.
Hi, Linda.
I'll let you do the other two projects. I'll finish the finance and you can talk the projects.
Okay, so I'm going to bring our attention to, and for the purposes of discussion, I'm going to make a motion. I move that the Finance Committee recommend the removal of the line item 271873 Historic Building Facade Program in the amount of $100,000, and that the sum be reallocated to the historic available funds. So someone could second that for me so that I could discuss why I want to
I
do that.
second it.
Thank you. Okay, so as we're well aware, we've talked about this in the past. This program was initiated, I'm going to say 4 years ago. There has been nobody applied for the program. And I don't see that it behooves the town to keep the $100,000 allocated for a non-viable project. So I feel strongly that that line item should be stricken, and that money, $100,000, should be made available, to be reallocated for a viable project under the category of historic. To be transparent, I was never a proponent of this project. I was in this very room, sitting in the second row, when the gentleman from the state came and discussed this program, was asked about this program, and at that time, he said it wasn't appropriate. And then the next round of projects, it came back up, and they said, well, they rediscussed it. Anyway, town meeting did pass it, but nobody has requested the funds. And what the funds were for was for North Chelmsford, Vinyl Square, for business owners to put a awning outside of their house. And so since no one has applied for it, and since last year I was assured when meeting that these monies were, going to be reallocated, that's why I made a specific motion that that would be our recommendation of the Finance Committee. And I would just say that since Chelmsford has been here and sent people, to the Concord Bridge, I'm sure there's lots and lots of historic items and buildings and projects that the $100,000 would, could aptly go to.
Okay, so Kathy, I think the appropriate place for this actually to be brought would be in front of the Community Preservation Committee. They're in charge of the funds. I understand your position. What you could do is during the time that we vote later on this evening, you could either vote down the overall budget, or you could vote and explain why you're doing that, or vote down a specific project. This is part of the general funds and part of the general government budget.
I'm just saying, that's why I said recommend. I didn't say that they have to do it. I'm saying
Okay.
that that's our recommendation. And also, last year, in my discussion, both with the chairman and Darlene, we talked about this, and it said that, yes, that was going to happen. So it's now been 4 years of $100,000 sitting there earning interest, so that's not bad, but not being utilized for any purpose.
Let me ask this question either to Darlene or to Linda. Has there been a need to use the $100,000? Are we at capacity for using funds within the CPC?
No, we're not at capacity using.
Linda, I'm sorry, if you don't mind, if you could come up, because people in the audience can't hear you, and I've noticed this at other meetings, people talk from the audience, you just can't hear them. So
No, we
Linda
don't.
Prescott, who's the chair of the Community Preservation Committee.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're not at capacity, with money, there's no shortage, we're in good shape. But it is, holding on to money that is not being used for 4 years. The rules, to get access to the money it's very defined, it's very definitive, and I think people just don't want to get involved.
Okay.
Okay, so nobody's really picked it up. And Evan wants to hang on to it because he feels it's one of those things he can lure people into, coming into business in either the Vinyl Square or the Center Square. But nobody's.
Has there any discussion at your committee about removing this line, or as you said, is this something that you're hoping that would attract someone to come do this?
We haven't had a lot of discussion. It was really heated when, and the man that came from the state was Stewart, and he is the guy that actually got the act written and passed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a heated discussion whether this was appropriate and if people would use it. So they're not. And I can't say we've had a vote to definitely do it, but there's been some discussion, a lot of discussion, and certainly the Historical Commission has, wants it gone.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for answering that question for me. We can certainly call a vote for
Well, that's why I'm
this,
saying, I'm just saying the
but
vote is
I-
for a recommendation. That's because,
I think,
and that's also the reason I said for discussion, so that
Yeah,
people
well,
could talk about it.
no, and I appreciate that, Kathy. I'm just not sure if
I did speak with Evan Belansky today regarding this, because this is his article that he brought, he came forward to this, he came to the
4 years
CPC
ago,
and
yeah.
asked for this. He would like to see it be brought to the Historical Commission or the Historical District to put it on their agenda to revisit it again before we recapture the funds. Again, I'm not in control of that. I don't know how, if that is what CPC would like to see, if the, or CPC wants to read.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a pointed question. Is it the entire committee, the Preservation Committee, or Evan Belansky who's in charge?
Of that program, it's Evan Belansky.
But I'm not of that, I'm talking about,
money?
the entire committee gets to choose, they vote on each of the items, so should not just be Mr. Belansky saying this is what I
The process
want.
would be having a vote by the Historical Commission.
Yeah,
The district is not involved with this. and then bringing it to the CPC and having an official vote.
Right, but he's just one member,
He's one member.
Okay.
right?
But we tend not to hold on to money that long that's not being used. So,
So I guess if it does go back, then that's the purpose of this discussion. So that's, I just think $100,000 could be utilized in other places in Chelmsford. 4 years, not one person has come forward.
Yep.
It seems like it's dead and it should be addressed. That's my point.
I agree.
So do you want, would you like me to table it on the, I can table my motion on the condition that it is brought back to the other committees?
Well, just as a reminder, if you table your motion, then we close it,
Oh,
it dies.
So maybe I don't want to table it. Okay, thank you. So, we'll, I'm happy to take a vote and see how other people feel on it.
So just for clarification, this would be a non-binding vote as a recommendation on the specific item.
exactly
For them
what
to
I
go
want.
back to their,
Non-binding.
as a recommendation by the committee to them. It would not affect the budget, nor would affect, I mean, it really has no,
Right, it has no effect because you have the 100,000, but what I could do is edit my motion to say, my recommendation is to remove it and, would like it presented as a vote to the various boards. How's that?
I think the only people that would really vote on it would be the CPC and the Historic
Right,
Commission as
that's
they,
what I meant
yeah.
by various boards, the
So
CPC.
you would like to make a vote that we recommend that they go do that?
Yes.
It's certainly, we can certainly do that. It's non-binding. They don't have to listen to it.
Yeah,
But
okay,
it's, I can certainly call a
I'm
vote.
gonna,
Just don't know.
I'm gonna change that. I want my motion to stay as, that it is my recommendation. That's how I want it, to be a
Even
recommendation.
I just want to know, it's just a little bit on the process.
Sure.
Even if you want to rescind the funds, it has to be a warrant article. So this would be on the fall town meeting, we could do a rescind. So what the committee, CPC, would take a vote, decide to rescind it, we would then have to have a warrant article. This does have to be voted on because it was voted on as a project, as an article at a particular town meeting. It needs to go back to town meeting as a rescind, and we're too late to do it for the spring town meeting, but we could do that definitely in the fall.
Okay.
So I have a question for Linda. Has there been any marketing for this program? Has there
Yes.
been any
Evan's been marketing it.
marketing it to just to Vinyl Square, or is it
For
open
both the center and the square.
center? Because I'm looking at, signs around the center, and they're looking a little rough around the edges, some of
Right.
them,
It was
so
supposed to be to actually improve the facade.
the whole
So it's more
facade.
than just signs, it's more than awnings. It's just improving the facade to make the building more appealable.
I
mean,
see.
And that's basically what it is. Also allow building owners to make their front doors handicapped accessible. It was that type of a thing.
Uh-huh. Well, I-
Evan doesn't like the look of North, of Vinyl Square.
Okay, so he wants to concentrate it on
Oh,
that.
yeah,
I see. I
and, but
see.
Vinyl Square likes it the way it is.
Okay, I
And it
understand.
just wasn't enough of a lure to bring anybody in.
So it's interesting, Bob's Old Coin Shop, which is now a nail salon, is recently redone and redoing
Mm-hmm.
their facade. So that was not part of this, that they didn't reach out to the town for funds?
No,
Not
Okay.
once.
Not once.
no. Now, we had
Okay.
one question from the lawyer in the middle of the square, and he inquired, but that's as far as it went.
Okay. Is there strict guidelines, criteria? Is that what it is? Is that the preventative
There
here?
is. It
Okay.
requires architectural drawings,
Oh, I see.
a time limit. It has, you get so far, the drawings are approved, that will give your money.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can, they're benchmarks. As you get into the project, it has to be examined so that it does meet the plans.
Okay.
Do we have any obligation to let potential recipients know that it's going
They do.
away? I mean, just before we vote and make it go away.
Well, so, Dennis, we would not be, David, we would not be taking this away. We would just be making a recommendation that we think that they should do that. There'd be a vote by the Historic Commission, there'd be a vote by CPC, and then a warrant article to remove it. So there'd be plenty of notice if this were to go away.
And it was noticed, the property owners were informed.
That's what I
That when
want
it
to know.
was-
Oh, that's
The
okay.
property owners were informed.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. And so plenty notification has gone out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So even if it goes away, I believe that a property owner could come back to us, the CPC, and ask for money for their piece of property.
As a separate potential article, essentially,
Well, yeah.
request
But
for
if they
funds.
want, they could probably do it that way, because we do have precedents, we've done it. So they could probably, come forward again.
Okay.
So it's not really absolutely off the books, but it is, requesting that the money be turned back to them.
Sure.
So is it our money to reappropriate? I mean, if we take it out, does it?
Yes.
No, it
Go back to the-
goes into their fund to be, for someone to come forward and say, I want to do something to the World War I monument, or whatever historic project.
It would return to the historical reserve.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
So the-
And that money would be there then to have another article or
Okay.
another project to be
So
done.
it's not use it or lose it in this very specific constraint
No, all it
way?
does is it will just
Okay.
move it from the project back to where it was voted from, and that was, I think, the historical reserve.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? So we do have a motion on the table. We're going to call a vote on that. It's a motion to recommend that they,
Yes,
Make sure
as
we're
I
clear.
read. And
Pam, you have the clear language of the
Want
motion?
me to repeat it? This is what I said. For the purposes of discussion, I'm going to make a motion. I move that the Finance Committee recommend the removal of the line item 271873, Historic Building Facade Program, in the amount of $100,000, and that the sum be reallocated to historic available funds. Is that?
To an
correct?
available fund, yes,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
correct. Mhm.
Okay.
I second.
It's already seconded. We've already had discussion.
Okay.
It's just reiterating the article to make
That's
sure it's
fine.
clear. So I'll call a vote.
Yes, please, thanks. It's all right.
Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those against?
I'm abstaining.
I'm going to abstain as well. All right. So we have 5 in favor, 2 abstentions. All right. I'm sorry.
That's
Please,
okay.
please continue with your
Yes,
presentation.
And I would like to say, I think it's a great program, well-run, has done lots and lots of things for the community, so.
It has. It really has. I've actually sent the head of CPC, Stuart, a list of all when it started, from the inception to what we've done now. And he loves seeing that, like what communities have done with their monies. It's been great. The next page of this, so these are all the projects. If anybody has any other questions before we go on, is where we are today with our revenues. So we had a total commitment of $1.4 million, almost $1.5 million worth of commitments. Then we do have some abatements that come up, and then the revenue that's collected, we've collected just a little over $1 million. So we have an open receivable right now of $392. That'll get on. This was in February, so we'll have another round of revenues that'll come in before the end of the year. Then you just see that we have other prior years open. They just have small little balances. We do end up collecting those either through the tax collection, or it ends up being liened, and then we get the money through that way. Interest does accrue on this fund, so we've collected $20,000 so far, and then our state match, we did receive that. It's $295,472. It's decreased a little bit over the course of the years. It's only because more communities are joining CPC, so the state match ends up going down when more communities join. And then the last page is it's all of our fund balances and where we are. The top half is the current projects that are open, where you say it's this C/F and the open space historic. Those are just the current projects. Then we have the reserve, the undesignated, and then the last 3 on the bottom are the 10%ers, the 10% that we put in. You'll be seeing that in the warrant articles that are coming up for the spring. Is we put in the 10%, and then we actually draw down on those 10% on the debt. That's just been the process that CPC decided to do, that they would take the debt from the 10% and pay that. We're allowed to do that instead of taking it from the reserve. So at this point, we do have our reserve for expenditures, or and our undesignated fund balance is $3 million. So there's a good amount still sitting there if we have projects that come up. There's a good reserve there. We've been trying to do that over the course of the years to build that back up. In case a big project does come up, we can be able to have borrowing. They like to see borrowing capacity, because if this fund goes away, we are still obligated to make debt payments out from this fund. So we always want to make sure that we have kind of a slush fund in there to make sure we can make all of our payments. Any questions on the finances? That's where we are fiscally. I will let Linda
Thank you.
speak to the 2 articles that are coming up.
We have a very quiet town meeting as far as request articles. We have 2, and they're both from the cemetery. One is to, and I forget what, I didn't bring my paperwork, and I don't remember what cemetery it is, but it has to do with fencing.
Oh, the fencing. West Chelmsford.
West Chelmsford, okay. Fencing. And the other one is preservation of headstones and forefathers. And David comes back about every other year, and he has about a dozen stones that he would like to restore. So, and we have probably one of the oldest cemeteries in the state. And what's unique about ours is that it is untouched, as in where those stones were first put and where those graves were, nobody's moved them. There was in the late 1800s, they wanted those stones to light up like soldiers, so they moved them here, they moved. Ours never happened. So, so it is the way the cemetery was originally laid out. So those are the only 2 requests.
And it's $8,000 for the forefathers burial,
Yes.
and then for the fencing, it's, hold on a second.
60,000?
Yeah.
60,000.
And that will finish the fencing for all the cemeteries.
That'll complete all will be finished at that
Yep.
point. Perfect. All right. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very much.
All right, moving right along, we have a review of the fiscal year 25 budget for the police department. With us this evening is Chief Colin Spence. Good evening.
Good evening. It's a privilege to be before all of you tonight. For those that do not know me, I'm Police Chief Colin Spence. I want to thank the Finance Committee for having me here. I also want to thank Chairperson Jim Clancy for the meeting a few weeks ago and your helpful guidance. It is also an honor and privilege for me to represent such an outstanding group of police officers and employees we have at the police department. As you will see from the presentation tonight, we've made many changes at the police department to better serve our community. Just to go through our goals and objectives, since I took over about 8 months ago, we made some changes as far as how we do things at the police department. And following behind Chief Spinney, we built upon our community engagement and wellness initiatives in the unit through community events, officer interactions, and our clinician outreach program, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. We're prioritizing employee wellness, training, recruitment, and retention. Our recruitment, we are currently down, like many departments. We're trying to hire. The town manager has let me hire as many as possible, which has been very helpful. We've increased police presence in the community, utilizing community policing strategies and different initiatives to prevent crime, focus on quality of life issues. And we continue to prioritize department outreach and diversity initiatives, the Police Athletic League Community Resource Dog Program, which is one of the most successful in the area. Police Department Internship Program, we just restarted that. We have 7 interns starting Monday. Elderly Living Safe Program, and then the Police Department Youth Academy. We've enhanced traffic-related programs to minimize motor vehicle violations, reduce accidents, facilitate traffic flow, and enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety. And we continue to work with our local and regional partners regarding school and workplace safety issues. and we prioritize the department's relationship with many federal, state, and local entities. As many of you probably noticed, we've increased our social media presence significantly through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, something called Tips 411, which is something people can report tips to us. And we just enhanced our police department website, which will be rolled out to the public on Monday. Currently, we have 70 total employees. That consists of the chief, deputy chief, 6 lieutenants, 10 sergeants, 36 patrol officers, 9 public safety dispatchers, 3 clerical support, 1 licensed clinician, which is completely grant-funded for all her salary and benefits, facility maintenance, a fleet mechanic, and animal control. As far as our division, the administrative division consists of the deputy and I, and we have an investigative division, which is this lieutenant, a sergeant, and 3 detectives, and 1 sergeant who is our court prosecutor. And then we have a special services division, which has 1 lieutenant, and we just recently formed something called the Traffic and Training Unit. With many of the changes facing policing, training has to be a priority. And we have one of the best training programs in the area. Sergeant Nick Zeminski, who's basically a use of force trainer, is extremely important to our department as far as what he provides for training and the trainings he brings in. And we also have 1 traffic and safety officer. And then our community engagement and wellness unit consists of 5 officers, 1 sergeant, 3 school resource officers, and 1 new position that I created, community engagement and social media officer. And then we have the patrol division, which consists of 38 officers, which are 4 lieutenants, 28 patrol officers, and 6 sergeants. And as you can see, we've changed a little bit as far as our organizational structure. I know it's a little difficult to see. With the creation of the Traffic and Training Unit and the Community Engagement and Wellness Unit. Now, as far as the required trainings that we have, which are changing yearly, trauma-informed policing, hate crime training, dealing with emotionally disturbed persons, crisis intervention training. One thing I would say, the crisis intervention training, we currently have over 85% of our officers have been through a 40-hour course. It's one of the highest in the area that I've heard, but we basically just completed that yesterday. De-escalation training, which is extremely important in policing. Duty to intervene training. We are purchasing TASER 10s, which is the newest de-escalation tool, which will be rolling out in approximately 2 months. Tactical training, update and use of force training, implicit bias training. All officers have been through that. Interacting with special populations, substance use disorder training, and officer wellness training. Now, if we get to the personnel costs.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I could ask some more questions about this required training?
Yeah.
So interacting with special populations, what do you mean by that?
It's all different populations as far as people with different disabilities. Could be somebody that is hard of hearing. How do we communicate with that person? Could be somebody with a disability. How autism would be one that would come to mind as far as how we.
So what I know you can't do 40 hours in 2 seconds, but what kind of training is involved in that?
That one was an in-service training that every police officer had to go through. It's an 8-hour training in dealing with different populations. And they bring in different groups that represent the different populations as far as somebody that's autistic may not like somebody touching their wrists, autism, different things that we should be looking for when we're dealing with the person.
That's great.
As far as our budget, it has gone up, As far as personnel costs, going up $278,839, about a 3.6% increase from FY24. Majority is due to cost of living adjustments for non-union personnel and the union contract adjustments. I've asked for an increase in funding for department overtime in the amount of $50,000. And the overtime drivers, shift replacement, staff education requirements, special events, and different deployments. We have a significant amount of special events. As most people know, our auxiliary police force, as part of police reform, was significantly reduced, so now I cannot use those volunteers, so I have to pay officers to go to those various events. And the other thing, with the shortage of employees, the overtime has gone up, because we have to replace the shifts, we cannot close.
Can I ask a question? Did I could be mistaken, but did I see that some officers were in the reserves and then they were called up?
Yes, and that is one of the, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
We obviously support them, and the town manager was great this year as far as making sure that they were compensated, the difference between what the pay was in the town of Chelmsford and what they were getting in the military. So the town made up that difference, which was something that was the right thing to do. And with those deployments, though, we have to replace them as they're out. Several of them were on the midnight shift, which pretty much if somebody takes a night off, you have to replace that person.
So is that replaced with overtime or is that new personnel? I mean, so that obviously the job has to be.
It's primarily overtime because we're still backfilling for other personnel. We've had a lot of retirements. I'm sure everybody's seen on our Facebook page. We have a lot of individuals that are over 30 years of the department and are starting to take retirement.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of hiring. We had another promotion this morning of a lieutenant, so we're looking forward to that. All our changes will be in place by April 1st.
Great.
So,
I was just curious how that worked, and I'm pleased to hear that the town is so supportive.
yeah, it really has been great, so. Now, as far as the first few are supported by the contracts, those are not something that I can really control as far as the clerical costs, full-time compensation, the mechanic, dispatch. The overtime, you'll see the overtime increase of $50,000 to $650,000. And then if we go down towards the bottom, the physical training incentive and also the wellness bonus I needed to increase. And the reason is we have a younger group of officers now, and they're taking advantage of these different bonuses that in the past they hadn't. And the newer officers have to go through the physical training and have to pass since 2012. So as older officers have left, now we have more that are eligible for this bonus.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm new, so I'm asking a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What is a fitness goal? Like running in a certain time?
It's generally the academy standards that they have to meet. So once a year, we do it at the police department. They have certain standards that they have to do, or run in a certain period of time. They have to go, hurdle over certain things in a certain period of time. It's mandated by the state what they have to do. And as soon as they pass that, they are eligible for the bonus.
And that's done on a yearly basis?
Yes, it has to be done every year. We usually do it in May once the weather gets a little better than tonight. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Now, as far as our expenses, our expense costs have gone up about $88,000, and I'll talk about that in a second, about 9.68% increase. And the major ones, vehicle maintenance, as everybody probably knows from their own personal vehicles. Maintenance on vehicles is much more expensive, so we did have to increase that by $10,000. The fuel, I actually went down a little bit on because fuel prices have dropped since the budget from last year. Dues and subscriptions, you'll see a large increase there. That is as we go more cloud-based in policing, where everything is up to date, we have to pay for that every year. It's a reoccurring cost. It's not something that we can take inside the police department. It changes so quickly. And as you'll see from past years, we averaged FY23 almost $65,000. So that's why I went with $65,000. New equipment, up about $10,000, and that is the same thing. It's more expensive. And the larger, I went up $32,000 for replacement vehicles and equipment. The new cruisers that we're getting are between $65,000 and $75,000, and that's with all the equipment. You know, everybody thinks it's just a vehicle. It's everything that goes in it, the radios, lights, everything. So as you'll see, dues and subscriptions went up by about $45,000. New equipment, $10,000. Replacement vehicles, $32,000. And the total budget increase was $366,839, 4.23% from FY '24 to FY '25. Now, animal control falls under the police department also. This is basically by the personnel board as far as what his pay is. And then as far as expenses, pretty much level from the year before. Exactly level, actually. Now, as far as our year-end statistical data, there are some numbers here that I will key on. As far as our calls for service, went up about 2%, 37,393. Our arrests are down about 5%. Traffic enforcement is down about 20%. Now, one thing I would say is as much traffic enforcement as we try to do, currently we are down a lot of employees. So we just don't have the amount of free time that they can go out and do the traffic enforcement all the time. We are working on that. We've recently hired 5 officers. We actually got 2 transfers, which is a big thing for us because they come in, they don't have to go through the academy. They're fully trained when they come in. And I'm happy to report 2 of those individuals are bilingual. Bilingual for us is big. A lot of times we have to call a different department in. Now we won't have to do that if they're working the shift. So it's a great addition for us. Motor vehicle accidents are up about 32%. Medical calls about 14%. I'll skip over some of these. Residential and commercial break-in and enterings are down about 50%. Domestics are down about 25%. Motor vehicle breaks are up about 55%, but the actual thefts are down about 11%. And that is because a lot of the technologies, they can get into the car, but they can't take the car. So I think we're starting to see that. Overdoses are up 13%. We've had 2 fatal. Fraud reports are up 43%. If you've noticed now, one of the things that we're concentrating on, we've started to teach classes at a lot of the senior citizen facilities in town. We've done 3 so far on internet and phone fraud. That's one of the things. I had 2 officers that were trained in it, so they can basically go and teach about it because we're seeing our elderly population is being targeted at an alarming rate, and that's why we're seeing it go up so much higher.
Do you want the elder, like when this happens, do you want them to contact you? Because like my mother, like it's happened to my mother a couple of times. My boss, his parents actually lost money.
Yeah.
Like, is this something that when this happens, they should be contacting the police so you can?
We always encourage that. Some people don't want to, but we always encourage that because if something happens 5 years down the road, it's nice to have that police report to be able to say, hey, listen, I reported to the police at this time. This card was used on, 2 months later, and you can use it. It actually helps you. So.
Even like when they call and they say, hey, I'm your grandson and I'm in jail and I need you to get $25,000 and bring it to the, I've heard about it.
We usually want that reported,
Okay.
normally. And the big thing for us is a lot of times we may use that information. We did have somebody that we actually ended up arresting, that's what they were doing.
Okay.
We got one of the couriers. So normally it's not it's a person that picks up they're not the caller. They're a courier. They're told to go to this address, pick this up, and, so basically that's how it normally happens.
But that can later be used as evidence in any subsequent trial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they're normally coming from the same people. And believe it or not, everybody thinks it's somebody overseas. It's usually somebody that's around here that has to know something about that person. So we encourage people to report it. As far as shoplifting, that's up 144%.
Oh, my God.
Which is something that I think is a little result of more people going out, since everything has been changing, and obviously with the economy, there have been some issues, so it has gone up significantly for us. As far as our foot patrols and property checks, 17,463. That just shows the activity that the officers are encouraged to go out, walk around buildings, go to the schools, walk around. And I added a new one this year that wasn't on last year, clinician response or follow-up. So we have a full-time clinician that's part of our wellness unit. And last year alone, she did 432 either responded to the scene or followed up with a phone call or something along those lines. So it's a pretty significant program for us. It is grant funded. We are reimbursed every month, but it's a very important program for us, so we're going to look to expand that further.
Are a lot of those repeat follow-up? Well, I know a follow-up obviously would be for the same individual, but are there multiple times during a year that clinician would be talking to the same person, same family?
Yes. In a lot of situations, they know each other by first name.
Okay.
We always send the clinician with an officer whenever she is dealing with anybody.
Okay.
So we always have an officer present.
Thank you.
And just to follow us on all the social media, we're really trying to push things out. It's very effective for us. And as I said, our new website launches officially on Monday. So
Check the link, it's dead now.
it's what?
No, it doesn't work now.
What goes live Monday?
Yeah, it goes live Monday.
So hold
I
off.
know they've been working on it. I was on it earlier. I know they're making
Or
some
actually, what I got
additions.
is a notice that's saying this is not legal in your system to go to this place.
Oh, I think that's an internal. Yeah, that's an internal. It will be.
That's a security certificate for your particular browser, which is saying that this hasn't been gone live yet. The certificate's not there. It's not letting you go through. That's probably what's happening.
Okay, good to know.
And I'm here for any questions. I welcome any questions.
Do you find that everyone is receptive to going for more training?
I think this generation, yes,
Okay.
I do. I think training's extremely important. We have a beautiful training facility that we're trying to bring different groups in, because normally when you bring a different group in, like there's something called the FBI Leader Program, which is very advanced as far as training our officers. I've been through 3 weeks of it, and it's one of those things that if we have them here, we get free seats in the training.
Ah,
So it works out pretty well, $800 a person.
now,
So,
years ago, like 10, I took RAD training from the Burlington Police with my daughters.
yes.
With my daughter. Do you ever going to offer anything like that, or
Well,
have you?
it's interesting you ask that, because we are looking at that now. We just got all the school department, believe it or not, bought all the equipment last year, and we're looking at getting that program back up and running. We stopped doing it pre-COVID, just before
Yeah, no,
COVID.
COVID messed a lot of things up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was I actually said to my daughter, if you ever attacked and you hurt somebody, when the police officer says, "How did you learn that?" you say, "Well, your brothers and sisters in the law in Burlington taught me how to do this."
It's a great program.
No,
It's a great program.
she's a whopping 4'11", and the two officers who attacked her in full tactical protect gear picked her up, which was always one of my fears because she's like 92 pounds. But fortunately, she at the time was a soccer player and kicked so hard that she kicked through the padding and the guy dropped her.
Huh? Well, that's good. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see that, but, you know.
No, but it's good to have that.
Yeah.
I really think that it's a very worthy thing, especially for young women.
Yeah, and we'll be pushing a lot of that out through the website as far as signups. There's actually going to be something for anybody with any kind of disability in the home that you can actually go onto the website and fill out a form that goes to the police department. It goes to dispatch. So if we get a call to your home, we're going to know what possible disability somebody might be hard of hearing, isn't going to hear the front door, or if there's a key somewhere, if there's some different issues, somebody might be in a wheelchair. It could be a host of different things, and that's going to all be available through the website.
Cool.
So
And it is a .com, not a .org or
it's a
.gov?
.com.
Okay.
Yes.
Chief, I have a question, please, regarding your clinician. You mentioned they'd get a reimbursement every month via a grant. Do you expect this grant to be renewed every year? How would you absorb this person's costs?
I think we would talk about that. I would talk with the town manager as far as that goes, if it came to that, but I don't see it going away. Honestly, I think
Good.
with the state
That's
of
my point.
Department of Mental Health, that's who funds it. I think just with what they're trying to do, it saves money from the hospitals because we can basically treat the person on scene. And one thing with having our own clinician 24 hours a day, well, actually, we have her Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, but as part of that program, somebody's always on call. So if we have a call, we can go on an iPad and go right to a clinician. And if the clinician's out somewhere, they'll come to the scene, or we can do it through the iPad.
Excellent. Okay,
So
thank you.
It really is a great program for us, and we're going to expand it as far as we can.
As a shared service with the Board of Health, correct? You guys work-
We
you guys-
we do share a clinician with the Board of Health. That's a little bit different.
A little bit different, okay.
Yeah, that's different as far as, primarily she's working at the Board of Health.
Okay,
So this clinician is assigned to us.
perfect.
So,
Thank you.
any other questions?
No, thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
Moving along this evening, we have a review of Article 26 MBTA zoning article. And with us this evening, we have Chris Lavalley. He's a member of the Chelmsford Planning Board. Let me pull up your presentation, Chris. There we go.
FAQs, MBTA zoning FAQs, is that the document?
So Jim, this morning I sent you the FAQs as well.
Yep,
Did you get
I have
those?
those.
Okay, great.
Those have been distributed to the group as well.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to be talking about our MBTA zoning proposal for town meeting. It is a topic that we continue to discuss in the planning board meetings. We had a meeting last night about it and had to update some of these slides, and we'll talk about that later on in the slides. All right, so the state has designated 177 communities in the scope of this law. They are MBTA communities or MBTA adjacent communities. In general, we talk about MBTA communities, but I want to make sure that people understand that we are an adjacent community and not one of those direct MBTA communities. We are adjacent because Lowell and Billerica are the primary MBTA communities near us, and we are adjacent to them, so we're considered an adjacent community. This is a zoning law that requires us to implement zoning and not actually build the units. And it requires us to implement zoning that allows building by right. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So a lot of people are wondering why the state is doing this, myself included. They're trying, it's an attempt to make more housing in the state. For seniors that want downsizing, to address the housing crisis, to encourage greater production of different sizes, and to really address that missing middle housing. And to encourage the use of public transportation, which is why they're really focusing it near bus and train stations. Okay, next slide. So what are the requirements? So an MBTA community or adjacent community has to create at least one zoning district, typically an overlay, similar to the other overlays that we have in town, that follows some general guidelines set by the state. And these guidelines, some of which are listed here, there are a lot of guidelines which I didn't list, but these are the main ones. It does not, again, I want to emphasize, there's a misconception out there right now that requires us to build the units, and it does not. It only requires us to zone for them. The state is not going to control this land after. It is only a zoning overlay that we're creating. It's similar to other sections of state law, 40A, some of the other zoning guidelines that we have to follow as we develop zoning in our town.
Excuse me, Jim, somebody from NIMCOG is trying to get in on the Zoom. Somebody's trying to participate.
Just submitted.
Just to not interrupt them.
Yep, thank you.
Participate on Zoom.
Do you want me to keep going?
Please
Okay.
continue, yeah.
While these multifamily units are permitted by right, it won't require any special permits in the zones. the projects will still be required to undergo all of our other regulations in place. Stormwater, sewer, Title V, Conservation Commission review if near wetlands. It will require our site plan review. So it will still require all of those reviews of the plans. Okay, next one.
Could I ask a little question?
Sure.
about the note at the bottom with the asterisk?
Yes. So that's related to the density and the capacity. So we have to zone at least 50 acres where we could put 10% of Chelmsford's housing stock. And that comes out to about 1,477 units. And so what we did was so the modeling that they used assumes that there's no units already there. So it's not like the zones that we're picking will be zoned for 1,400 additional units. It assumes that there's no units there, and that's the capacity that we're zoning for, at 15 units per acre.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So this is the missing middle that they're looking at from the state. As a planning board, our strategy was to focus on the lower half of that. So we really look at lower density units. We're not looking for the high-rise buildings. We're not looking for 5-story buildings. We're really zoning for the smaller, lowest density we can possibly get with these overlays, which is the 15 units per acre. So our strategy going into this, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out our strategy. We really wanted to minimize the negative impacts, decrease any commercial impacts, try and stay away from heavy commercial areas so we didn't potentially lose those commercial developments. We wanted to really look at areas that would favor longer-term development instead of short-term development. Because we know that our current infrastructure cannot take any more development in the short term. We also looked at the UMass area because that zoning overlay was already created with MBTA zoning in mind. So we wanted to utilize that. And we wanted to look at areas that were as developed as possible, because we wanted to minimize the likelihood of it being developed in the short term. We also looked at condo associations because the likelihood of those being developed in the short term is even less than a single owner. So the planning board process that we followed started in June, where we started working with NEMCOG to get help on the process, interpret the state requirements, look at our modeling, understanding the new law, and then brainstorming potential areas in July. NEMCOG has been a tremendous asset in helping us navigate this process and doing a lot of the technical modeling we needed to take a look at what areas we could use for the zoning. Then in early September, we did the analysis of the modeling, narrowed down the list to UMass West and UPS and 110 multifamily area. So we had public input sessions for those areas that we were looking at to get public input, see if we're on the right track, get any additional thoughts and ideas. We're also looking for additional areas that we hadn't thought of yet in those public meetings. Go to the next slide. In October, we gathered those areas. We also looked for additional input from the various town committees, boards, and departments. We then narrowed it down to 2 areas that we finally selected in November, and then started to focus on the zoning itself. We decided to base the MBTA zoning on the current multifamily zoning bylaws that we have now, as well as the UMass West overlay district that was developed. So the MBTA zoning mimics those zoning guidelines as much as we could. Then we started drafting and revising, and we continued to do outreach up until town meeting. So the next slide starts showing the districts that we have reviewed. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but we looked across town at various areas. We looked at commercial areas. We looked at the hotel properties in Radisson. We looked at UPS, Turnpike in Billerica. We also received a letter from Davis Company offering the Riverneck property as a possible site, so we did look at that in our due diligence. And we ultimately selected, if you go to the next slide, UMass West area. That includes 3 parcels, the UMass West campus as well as the 2 multifamily development condo areas, and then the 110 West multifamily area with 10 parcels containing 7 multifamily condo developments. And so this is the diagram of the UMass West area that we've selected. In the top, you'll see the UMass West campus, and in the lower left and right, you'll see the 2 Windermere and Meadowood areas. So in the modeling, we had to look at gross acreage, developable acres. We looked at what modeling we could get for gross density. And this site, taken in total, does give us a unit capacity of just over 1,000 units. For some perspective, we also added the current units and potential new units so that if it ever does get built, it wouldn't be adding 1,000 units to the town. It would only be adding 521 units in total. So that's the other reason why we looked at built-out areas, because the net gain of units to the town would be lower. So the UMass West District also includes an age-restricted developments, and then as well as the choice housing. We'll get to that in a minute. The 110 district is shown here. We wanted to keep the district as small as possible. So you will see that the Woodcrest Condo Association, only some of the parcels there are included. One parcel is excluded. That was not initially intended. It was just to keep the size as low as possible while still meeting the requirements. But we also feel that that is also an advantage because it would help keep the condo association together.
So we're looking at 110 here.
Yep.
And the left spot there where it says Littleton Road. Okay, so is that the bank? Is that Enterprise
Yes.
Bank?
Yeah.
And then Woodcrest?
Yes, that includes Enterprise, Ledgeview, Woodcrest, and Fox Hunt.
And the far right one, is that a different, or is that all Woodcrest? Is Woodcrest?
That's all Woodcrest.
Oh, good, but they're not
So those 6
included.
buildings are Woodcrest. And we've included 4 of the 6. They're 3 separate properties. 3 separate properties.
And the
Parcels.
two buildings in the upper right hand that aren't in the dark yellow, those are the 2 that are excluded? Is
Yep.
that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, those are the 2 from Woodcrest excluded.
And I'm sorry if I missed, what was the reasoning for excluding those 2?
Part of it was just controlling how big the zone was. We didn't want to make it too big. But at the same time, we realized after that might be an advantage because it's unlikely that the condo association would ever agree to sell only half of or a portion of the units and not all of it.
So when you mean sell, you're saying someone would come along, buy all the condo owners out and build even more dense housing?
Yeah, so the only way that this could get built is if a developer comes in, offers to buy up all of those units at market value, and then demolishes them all, and then builds up new units with a slightly higher density. And the developers would likely end up losing money off of that.
How many units, did you say, how many units are totally?
So
Next slide.
in this district, yep, we have a unit capacity of 477 units. 211 are currently there. And so it would be 266 additional.
Within that yellow.
Yep.
So someone could sell Enterprise Bank there and build 15 units on that property? Is that what I'm?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
So it's
All right.
all on that side of 110.
All right, next slide. So this gives a little bit of an indication of what the guideline requirements are. So 1,477 units is what is required for the zoning. Minimum area of 50 acres. That would give a density of almost 30 units per acre. And we really wanted to stay much lower than that. So that's why we went to close to 100 acres. Unfortunately, it gives a modeling of a higher number of units, so 1,500 units, but it does bring down the density of the units to about 15 per acre. And because we're modeling after our current multifamily zoning, these are the current architecture that we see at Glenbrook, Woodcrest, and Foxhunt. And this is what we would strive to continue modeling these zones after if they were to be any projects coming before us for them. So just to highlight some of the bylaw, it's a long text, so I just wanted to highlight some of the requirements in our bylaw. Some of the concerns that folks have are addressed here. So again, maximum density of 15 units per acre. We do limit the buildings to 3 stories, not 5 or any higher. We would only allow up to 24 units in any single building, and not more than 6 units from a single entrance. It allows townhouse and medium multiplex style buildings. We want varying architecture in our zoning. And we've also included the requirements for open space recreational areas, as well as covered bicycle storage, or integrated storage if it's a larger building. So these are the slides I've added since last night.
Yeah, I watched.
For those of you who did not watch the planning board last night.
So the pre-adoption review from the EOHLC.
What's that stand for?
Executive Office of Housing and
Livable Communities. Yes. So it's the state agency that is working with towns to get compliance. So initially we had an email from them on March 6th that gave us some preliminary information. Most of those issues that they saw with our bylaw were pretty minor edits that we took care of in the March 13th meeting. Small updates. One was even a checkbox that we added to the form that we filled out. The one I did want to mention is the last bullet, the exemption from all special permit requirements. Unfortunately, that exemption also does include an exemption from the Aquifer Protection District. But after some discussion in the planning board meeting, and after looking at our site plan review bylaws, any of the stormwater issues that we would be addressing in the Aquifer Protection District are also addressed in our stormwater components of the site plan review. So removing that aquifer protection special permit does not impact what we would be looking for in these projects. The subsequent email that we received from them on March 18th addressed another more significant concern that they had with the UMass West development agreement between the town and the developer. Their feeling was that that letter conflicts with the compliance model because it brings the capacity of that site below the 77 units that we would be required to put in or required to zone for in order to meet compliance. The affordability component of that developer agreement also at 15% exceeds what we currently have in the bylaw at 10%. We are looking to continue with a feasibility study that will allow us to increase that to 15%, but that still is pending right now, and we're not sure when that will actually be able to take place and be put into that bylaw. So right now it's at 10%, but we have every intention on increasing that to 15 when we can. And that, so right now that developer agreement does conflict with that 10%. And then the age restriction in the developer agreement does directly conflict with the zoning requirements. So the issue that the state has presented us is that because this is an agreement between the town and the developer, they're seeing it as essentially an end around the zoning bylaw requirements. So after some discussion last night at the planning board, the recommendation to bring it to the select board to recommend that we amend the developer agreement to remove these restrictions. Because the developments are well underway, and the regulatory agreement paperwork has been filed with the state and is expected to be approved within a few months. We do see that the risk of something happening where these restrictions can be altered is pretty low.
Excuse me, so what you're saying is even though you're gonna propose that, you're proposing to go to the select board to amend the agreement with the builder, you see that there's a low probability that the builder would agree to those?
No, based on discussions that we had, we think the developer would be amenable to those changes.
I would think so too, because it gives them higher density.
But we're thinking that there's a low probability that these would actually be, any changes would happen to the development. Because the development's already been permitted, it's already been planned, the plans have been drawn up, building has started, and the agreements with the state for the regulatory agreements, the paperwork has already been filed, and we're expecting those to be approved in a couple months.
So
So,
you change the I'm gonna try to summarize here, I'm sorry. So we change the agreement, however, we don't think the end result is gonna be that development is actually gonna change.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
They've gotten financing on.
yes, they have, but they have gotten permits, but where are we in the building process? And permits are amendable within 3 years. So, I mean, it's possible. We're talking 77 additional units that we need in density in that area. That concerns me because we spent a long time going over the UMass West property. I live very close to that. There was a lot of discussion about traffic. There's a lot of discussion about the impact on schools. A lot of discussion about various different items. And if we're now making a change and taking protections out of that developer agreement, which was worked on for quite some time, to allow for additional 77 units in that area, and we're saying, well, they're unlikely to build it. That concerns me.
Yeah, I know. There were a lot of concerns last night as well. We looked at other options, we discussed other options. The only other option would be to add another sub-district with additional units.
and that you would not be able to proceed at this town meeting. You'd have to go to either a special or default town meeting. You're concerned about the deadline. However, are you also concerned about the ability to get this passed at town meeting?
Yep.
And I understand that they just got back to us on the 18th with these additional concerns.
And town council, just for the record, town council did reach out to them and speak to them in the beginning of this process and talk to them about the developer agreement that we had and how we were proceeding. And, while they did not get, no or yes, they kind of.
It's easy not to give a straight answer if you can then change how you're going to address it later on.
Yeah.
So, how many buildings would 77 units be? I mean, that seems vast to me. I have no idea.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
It'd be at least another build.
It would be probably 3, because our bylaws permit up to 24 units in a single building.
Is there buildable land enough for that to allow for people to just move around and breathe and park and?
I don't think so. There's some
What's the- I guess I'm
conservation
missing the
restrictions in
point.
there.
So they simply
Land
want
bank
us to
parking.
change the law so that we could potentially add the 77, but there's really not enough buildable land to do it.
One option we did look at yesterday was adding additional acreage on the other sub-district to make up for that difference. But the NEMCOG folks felt that would be seen, it would be seen unfavorably by the state, and it would probably also get rejected.
because then it's obvious that we're trying to limit actual building.
Yes.
So even though
what percentage of the town is actually built at this point? I mean, we're, what,
Yeah.
98%
Yeah,
built up?
right.
I mean, at a certain point in time, the state has to recognize the fact that we don't have the space to build.
Like, that we don't have the,
Yes,
so
and,
many acres.
and the whole, like UMass West, like what's really annoying is the whole UMass West,
Oh, of
what
course they don't
got
care.
sold
I
to
know.
town meeting was, it was going, like, we worked with the state at that time, right, with the regs that we knew that they were heading down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the density at the time that they were proposing was like 13 units per square foot. That changed to now 15 units
Mm-hmm.
per square foot.
Well, I completely understand what the thought process was by the
No,
by the planning board, and I completely
No, I'm
supported the
talking
thought
about, like-
process, yeah.
Like the whole town's process,
Yeah.
like, we all went into town meeting saying, oh, this is a development project, this will,
Mm-hmm.
we've got the MBTA community coming down the pike, this would could count toward it.
My
Now the state's
my
saying-
concern is that if we start looking at another zone at this point, it would raise a flag, I think, with the state if we didn't select an area that is buildable in the short term.
What area would that be?
River Neck,
River Neck, okay. Well,
They're-
UPS will take care of it.
UPS,
Where the, is it 119, 201, the old Mercury buildings? Is that what you're referring to?
yes.
And since Davis wasn't able to do their
So
last
that would
filed
be 4.
wilderness.
But, okay, like, I have a crazy question. Doesn't this have to have some sort of bus or something come near it?
No,
I mean,
Mm.
is,
not,
No.
not in an
No.
adjacent community.
The way that the way that they describe adjacent communities in this law is any community that borders a community that has service. So because we border Billerica and Lowell, we are considered an adjacent community. It means we have a lower requirement as far as units, and it means we have a different deadline as far as this law is concerned. That's why you're seeing Milton going forward with their issues and their lawsuit, and actually just in the paper today, they have now filed their answer and brought their counterclaims in this action. The problem remains is, yeah, I agree. We don't have that service in our town, and yet we're still being beholden to this particular requirement that is, once again, an unfunded mandate. From a state that, quite frankly, has never given us a good percentage of state funds back.
yeah, no kidding. So the Mercury site would be a big enough thing to have a extremely dense 4 buildings, right?
No.
No, it's a pretty
No,
small lot.
No, it's small, it's small,
I used to
and.
work there. It's a
yeah,
pretty small lot.
It's a small lot. The only place that we could present is UPS. UPS is one lot, is over 100 acres. Would give us the.
Isn't UPS at UPS?
Yes.
I mean, I don't like.
Yes, yes. and
Yes, Kathy,
we-
again,
yes.
our town is very built up.
Right, but that would be a zone that you could,
But, okay, so that's actually going with the same principle that, if you did UPS, it's going with the same principle that there is already something on that site. So in fact, you're zoning it for the probability that it could eventually be used for that. But right now, there's a facility there that would limit that.
yes, and those of us who live in East Chelmsford probably would rather have the housing than those tractor trailers that we're looking at, but that's a whole nother story. However, UPS, the likelihood of that, so the way we had done it this way is condo associations, it's already built, there's a financial barrier for anybody to come in, buy something up, tear it down, and rebuild something. So that was almost, I don't want to say zero, but zero, right? UPS is a corporation. They can decide tomorrow, oh, let's sell this and let's go, I don't know, down to Burlington or go up to Nashua, right? Like, we have no control when and how long they will be there.
And
So that was a concern.
I just noticed Kelly from NEMCOG is on as well, so if we do have specific questions for NEMCOG.
I did, if I'm able, I would like to clarify something. And it's that there are, part of the reason why there are 177 communities that are subject to this law is because pretty much every single one of those 177 communities is largely built up to one reason or another, to one density or another. None of these individual communities have large tracts of land where there could be an intense amount of housing produced all at one time. So what the state is looking for, and what we're seeing in a lot of communities that are successfully passing this, is that they're looking at areas that would eventually, over time, either in the near, mid, or long term, be redeveloped. Now, one strategy of doing this is one that the planning board has pursued, which is to look at condo developments that are extremely unlikely to ever be sold and redeveloped because of the difficulty in aggregating all of those properties and then the financial hurdle to redevelop them. There are other strategies that other communities have looked at, which is looking at like town centers or the parcels that are immediately next to town centers, like places that they would want to put those districts that would maybe over time encourage redevelopment. So there's not only one approach to doing this, and the state is not looking necessarily for communities to be providing large vacant lands of immediately developable property, but just that trying to look at opportunities for where you would want to encourage redevelopment.
So, to that point, as we were discussing some of the areas in the planning board, we did come up with some of the areas that we were talking about that we did want to see redeveloped. But the feeling was that we wanted to redevelop them and rezone them on our terms and not with zoning that was state-controlled that may change in the future. So some good did come out of this process. We did identify some areas that the planning board does want to go back to and take a look at the zoning to do a little bit more encouraging of redevelopment, but not, we felt it was not applicable through this.
I want to go back to the 110 and the two buildings that are excluded. If you included those two buildings, how does that affect I mean, you're in the same complex, and now you've included the other two buildings. Does that help meet your numbers?
We did talk about that, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the feeling was that that still would be looked unfavorably by the state because we would still artificially be inflating one area that's unlikely to be developed because we've got the restrictions in the other area.
So
we are looking at how that would adjust the breakdown of like how, if that would bring you into maybe what has been referred to as paper compliance. And one of our planners is calculating that out right now. Our caution was that before going too far down to bringing a warrant article to town meeting, we would want to make sure that that was run by the Department of Housing, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, to understand whether they would have any objections to that.
And how concrete are these responses from the executive office? And how sure are we going to be that once we've said, okay, we think we're going to be in compliance here, 6 months down the road, we're being told, oh, sorry, we're not going to consider that to be in compliance? What is the possibility of that happening? Because it sounds like we've spent some time, we've submitted this, and then now it's come back and said, oh, well, too bad, so sorry, we don't think that's going to fit, because there's a restriction that's been, quite frankly, not an end around, but a development agreement was put into place multiple years ago after a long process.
So the state is looking at, and we've seen this in Westford, we've seen this in other communities that we're working with. We're working with 7 communities in the northern Middlesex region on compliance. The state is looking particularly close at parcels that have a high unit capacity. Because any community that's proposing perhaps 1 or 2 parcels that contain, 30 to 50% of the total unit capacity, they just want to make sure that that's a legitimate thing. And so in a situation like this, where they have been made aware of a development agreement that effectively limits the capacity to a level that is below what the law requires, that draws their attention. The other thing that they have offered is, and the reason why the draft zoning was submitted to HLC, is because they offered a 90-day review, and that 90-day review gets probably as close as a guarantee to understanding whether the zoning is compliant in advance of a town meeting vote. Because the one thing you don't want to do is bring something to town meeting, have town meeting approve it, you go through the political capital of having town meeting approve something, and then only to find out that you now have zoning that allows for something by right but is not compliant with the law. And so we did submit that. We feel very confident that if the issues that have been raised by HLC are addressed, we feel confident that should the zoning then be approved by town meeting, it would be compliant. This is basically just an internal review process, and it gives us some assurances that what would go forward would be compliant.
So, Chris, are we concerned that we had this update on the 18th, and now we're going to town meeting? Historically, controversial articles like this, especially when they've been presented by the planning board, have not been successful. Where we have a change coming to the plan, very, very, very close to the article being presented at town meeting. Is there concern about proceeding this way with what we currently have?
Yes. And we did discuss that last night. We're still considering what our options are, and we wanted to wait till we meet with the select board to discuss it with them.
Okay.
But we didn't want to stop the process. We wanted to keep it moving so that if we decide that we want to continue on at this town meeting, we're able to. But we are still keeping all our options open, from holding it off till fall town meeting to potentially a special town meeting.
And then if you did the special in the fall, are you still within the time parameters of the state's requirements?
Yes, we have till the end of the year to do this. So if we wait, the challenge that we're going to face at any town meeting with this zoning is that it'll be very difficult to understand why people are voting it down if it does get voted down. It could be that they didn't like the bylaw language. It could be that they didn't like the areas, either one or both of the areas that we selected. Or it could be that they disagree with the state doing this and are voting no in principle. So without knowing how to address and how many people are voting negative for either one of those reasons, it's going to be very difficult for the planning board to figure out how to bring it forward a second time to get it passed. And when we do bring it forward a second time, it has to be a different. It has to be
You can't be the
different.
same one within the same period of time. I understand. So you're hoping for healthy discussion at the town meeting if it is voted down?
Yes.
Yeah, which I'm sure you'll get.
I just want to go back to the 77 units and the West Campus. So the risk there would be that you're setting it up for a possible 77 extra units, which we really don't think can fit in there, which we think the state will say that's bogus. Is that basically the general drift of the situation?
No, my understanding from Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that in fact, the removal of the current density restriction in the agreement with the developer would increase the available density, and therefore there would be a possibility that that could be built there, but it not necessarily will be built there.
Okay.
And I don't know enough about that site to know how likely it is that they can squeeze in another 77 units.
That seems,
And they also
like
have,
already the people in that neighborhood are like, having troubles with the construction and the volume and all that
A
stuff.
lot more trees came down than we thought were going to come
Yeah.
down.
Where are we with that site? How, Paul, maybe you can provide an update. Where you're closer to it, or Jim?
I'm real
Like,
close, yeah.
Yeah, how, what's been poured, what hasn't been poured, how much have they?
They're in the process of they've leveling topography. They've completely taken down all the buildings and raised them. They've taken down a trees to the tree line of the wetlands. They're in the process, I believe, of starting to lay where foundations will go. Remember, they also have to put in a sewer treatment plant as well. So that process has to go in, and they have to put that facility in and then lay the lines for that as well, because we had the issue with capacity for sewer. As part of the agreement for them building there, they had to build their own treatment facility on site. But they've started that process, but nothing has been,
Poured.
I don't believe anything's been poured.
So if we move this to a special town meeting, maybe in the summer,
That might affect
Like,
the ability for
Billy-
them to adjust and amend and
right, if we
and-
can get
yeah.
that stuff poured, they start then it becomes a little bit harder for them to actually,
Wouldn't have to amend it.
They
Might have to with the
might,
treatment
yeah,
plant.
yeah.
That would take quite some.
That would take quite some time. So that might disincentivize them from doing that, but there's no guarantee that it will.
right, but I think it'd be, my person, I think some of us on the plan board, it's the going in front of town meeting, right, and presenting this and having these, makes it uncomfortable for people to say yes to it, right? But I think if we go and we wait a little bit of time, and I'm just talking out loud here, and stuff is already poured, and it's hard, right, then you're like, okay, I got it, this is a paper, we're just fixing
Yeah.
this on paper, I got it, because the likelihood of this now, them backtracking and waiting and having to go for more approvals and changing the foundation,
Yeah, I'm
now
not-
it becomes less
I'm not
easier.
as concerned about the regulatory agreements. Those are going to continue. Those are going to get executed. I'm not concerned about that. It's the additional potential units that does concern me a little bit more.
Can the state force us to find room
Sorry.
there? I'm sorry.
Maybe Kelly knows.
Obviously, if town meeting were to approve the bylaw, we have to submit a bylaw to the Attorney General for approval within, 60 days after the town meeting. And then the Attorney General's office has 90 days to act on the bylaw. But we don't have to submit to the end of the calendar year to the state for MBTA zoning bylaw approval, right? So could there be a situation where the town meeting approved the bylaw, it's submitted to the Attorney General for a review and approval, but if the regulatory agreement isn't amended until a later date in the year, at which time it's then submitted to compliance with the MBTA zoning bylaw, would that achieve the same result of the delay in terms of the disconnect? Because if the town doesn't do it, then it's not in compliance, so nobody can build because it's not in compliance with the MBTA bylaw. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, there's a distinction between town meeting approval and Attorney General approval of a zoning act versus the deadline for the submission
So
of the.
Paul, you're saying that holding
bylaw
off on making the change to the regulatory agreement until such time as there's been a review by the submitted approved bylaw to the Attorney General's office,
Right.
at which time we'd be further along in the process, and there'd be less of a concern of there being any additional units being currently built on that property.
Right, in other words, you could do that modification of the,
the development
into the
agreement.
fall.
So we enter a game of chicken.
And still have a time to go to town meeting if there was an issue. Right, I'm thinking, yeah, I think that's.
It's a proverbial game of chicken, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's basically saying, because, as I pointed out, it's not an easy transition, because if you're doing that project, you not only got financial issues in terms of your lenders, but you'd also have to go through, I believe you have to go through an amendment to your MEPR approval, which we know took quite some time. And then you would have to, beyond that, then also have to modify your package treatment plant, which we know took quite a considerable amount of time.
It did, yeah.
And have the land and space to do all that stuff. So it's not as easy to pivot as I think you could see. So there might be I'm saying is the distinction between town meeting action versus submittal of the bylaw for compliance.
So Chris, you mentioned that is the meeting, I don't think it's been posted yet, there's a plan to have a joint meeting with the planning board and the select board regarding the development agreement. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
Evan, we had suggested that last night, and Evan was going to reach out to the chair to try and set that up for the next.
Okay, well, they're both sitting there, so maybe they can talk.
Oh,
Oh, you're not the chair, that's right, I apologize.
I didn't see Evan behind me.
Evan's here.
Keeping an eye on you. And it's majority vote at town meeting for the zoning article.
Yeah, it's not a 2/3 votes majority, yeah.
Was there legal counsel last night here
Yes.
for this conversation?
Yep.
And what was their general bird's eye view of the situation?
He felt that the changes to the developers agreement for the affordability and age restriction should not be an issue because of the regulatory agreements. He did say that because of the sensitivity of the area, it might be difficult for the change in units. But he did acknowledge that the likelihood of it actually happening is pretty low because of all of the issues that they would have to go through to pivot. But he
why
did acknowledge the sensitivity of that area and the agreements with the neighbors.
So if the state knows that, why would they continue to push this area? Why would they continue to push the regulatory change? Why wouldn't they just make us go find something else? I mean, because ultimately that area would never be
They're not
compliant.
pushing the area, we chose that, right? Like, and town meeting chose it back when we did it, so that's
Yeah.
why. So we're choosing that area because it was already
But
built.
they're choosing to say that we're not compliant.
Because the rules now are, the density has changed from when we first adopted that, when that developer first came in and they first passed the law, there were guidelines out there, but they weren't defined.
The developer agreement limits it to 13 units per acre. Whereas the
Okay.
state's asking us to increase that to
15.
15.
15.
Okay, got it.
That's the
Perfect.
difference.
Excellent.
That's the
Thank you.
difference between the two.
That's it. Okay, got it.
And, and again, it kind of goes
What a
back.
mess.
Got it.
Goes back to, do we go in front of town meeting, try to explain all of this?
Exactly.
And again, even though the whole intent of us as town meeting approving UMass West 2 years ago was because we wanted it to be counted, it just feels, I get it, like I understand it. And then if they say no to us, then what do we do?
I think if I lived in precinct 1, 2, or 3, I'd be hard put to vote in favor of the even small possible. I'm just talking out of my personal perspective. If I lived in that neighborhood and I was a representative of 1, 2, or 3 precinct, and there was even a remote possibility that 77 other units were already going to come into an already, what I'm seeing as
400
a
units, yeah.
dense property, I'd have a very hard time voting for it. That's just my,
Especially since
My-
it was sold as this was the answer to that problem.
As
Right.
a precinct 2 resident and representative, I could echo what you're saying.
yeah.
And while I agree with everything that was said, I'm wondering how much that's going to change between this town meeting and the time that we now would have to do a special town meeting or fall town meeting. How
And
much
others-
more, I know it's going to be more certain, but is that going to be enough certainty to comfort the people?
So Chris, can we talk about and maybe Kelly can jump in if necessary, the ramifications of not submitting on time?
Kelly?
So I think
The real
What we saw in
ramifications and not the
Milton is one
proposed
exi-
ramifications I'm sorry, the real ramifications and not the proposed ramifications that the Attorney General is looking for through the lawsuit. So what would be the actual current ramifications?
Well, I guess it depends on what grants the town is currently receiving. So if the town has applied for or received, or is in the process of working on a MassWorks grant, like any of those big grants, I know that Evan has calculated that the town has received, I think, $1 million in funding in the last fiscal year from some of these grant sources. So those grant sources would no longer be available to the town. So there would be potentially, and again, it depends on, I don't know that for certain what you've gone after right now, but those would be, that you would lose access to that grant funding until such time as the zoning would be approved.
Is there any opportunity for us to, I don't know, kind of push back
Thank
with
you.
the state? Because again, we went in this with good faith effort 2 years ago to get ahead of this. I mean, they could watch our town meeting presentations, UMass West, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that.
Yeah, they don't care. Quite frankly. Which is the most frustrating part about it. So from what I'm hearing tonight, I don't think this is ready for a recommendation later on this evening from our board, because you even you're planning on having a discussion with the select board sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the meeting that we're expecting to talk to them is, I think, the 8th.
The 8th.
And Chris, do you have any expectations as to what will come out of that meeting with the select board? What's going to change?
We don't know.
Get up that crystal ball, Sam.
I think part of it too, again, is like moving this forward, getting more people's feedback, right? Because, last night we were 7, 8 people.
Yep.
We're 7 more, right? Like, it's really just trying to talk this through with as many stakeholders as we can. The only other thing of doing a special town meeting, it would give us more time to do outreach and kind of, again, just like we were doing outreach now, this is a change, yes, but this is why we don't think this is going, UMass West will change. Does give us more chances to do the outreach and to get people comfortable versus trying to spring it on them this spring town meeting.
I think the thing is people, I think people are going to want a little more information. Like, it's not necessarily more time to prepare them and you still have less information. I mean, there seems to be too many moving variables here.
Yeah, and that's my concern
And
is
that we
if
don't know the
wait-
answer from the state or the boards or whatever whether they're going to change it and whether they would, after it's changed, would the state approve it? So it seems like the state is saying you have to do this by a deadline, but we're not going to give you the information you need.
Well, I think like Kelly said, the state has already given us the things that they want to see, and that 90-day review period was intended to be, here's all the feedback. What we encountered, though, is that their preliminary email that they initially sent us did not include the issue about the developer agreement. And that was just sprung on us
Yeah, and
just before the last
don't
meeting.
envy you for that, and I understand that was just sprung. I watched the entire meeting I watched all of these meetings, actually.
It would have been nice for them to tell us in that
Right.
initial email, or even before that, because they knew that this developer agreement existed. Town council approached them about it.
So why didn't they? What do you think?
We don't know.
Again, that's that crystal ball we're talking about
Oh,
here.
yeah, it just doesn't
So
seem.
my concern is that if we delay it, it's not like we can delay it a year. We're delaying it by months.
Well, we can, it's just there are consequences
Yeah.
if we do.
In order to meet the
Can't afford
deadline,
to take the consequences.
Well, the special town meeting, Paul, can you remind me what the average cost of a special town meeting is? I know, I'm sorry, I put you on the spot here.
It's not the cost of a special town election, which gets everybody on.
True.
Special town meeting is probably a couple $1,000s at best. I mean, it's really a nominal cost. We own the facility. There's not much utility cost to use the
True.
facility. It's just basically, gathering the police details and work, check-in workers and other stuff for it. So it really is a trivial cost.
Is there concern about the availability of representatives at a special town meeting?
Well, yeah, you don't want to be doing this after school lets out or before Labor Day. So I think your window is really the third week of June. Actually the second week of June
Second
this
week
year,
of June,
or until after Labor Day. It's not going to be well accepted if you try to do this in the middle of the summer when people are away traveling, vacationing, and otherwise. So
And should the this article as presented without change be voted down by town meeting, how much of a change in the article would we need to see in order for it to be represented in a different format to the town?
The planning board has the authority to reconsider an article. What that 2-year restriction is on an outside party who brings an article. The planning board can refuse to
any changes?
Accept the article for consideration. But the planning board has a right to waive their own article for reconsideration or revote within that 2-year period that people talk about.
Yep, so we're not concerned about that.
That's
at all.
not a concern.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
so one of my concerns with having that special town meeting, that's not, the special town meeting, if we're doing it before summer, is not going to buy us much time. And how much more certainty are people going to have in that short window? Then we're left with fall town meeting. And if that doesn't pass at fall town meeting, then we start getting into some really difficult special
Yes and
meetings.
no, because a special town meeting, he's talking about prior to letting school out, a special town meeting can be called with the proper notification at any time during the year. So we're not saying that if we don't have a special town meeting in June, we can't have one, have to wait to October and end of October. No, we're saying a special town meeting could be called in August, September, even early October. I think we're adding a false
But if
change there.
we're wanting to do that outreach and the education and more discussion with this change, it's going to be hard to do that in the summer.
Okay.
And I don't think that would get us many additional support, much
You're afraid about
additional
moving the
support.
needle between that then and there.
So I do like the idea, though, because of what Paul had said, is if we prove the article, which is a big if, we don't change the development agreement until we need to. Because when I asked town council last night about this, he said we had to do it within 30 days.
Yeah, to submit the article.
Submit the article to
Attorney General.
the Attorney General.
But that's just them approving the zoning.
But is that potentially going to, is the non-compliance going to be an issue that the Attorney General is going to be looking at with this specific zoning article?
She seems to be pretty litigious, so possibly.
And that would be my concern with sending this to the Attorney General after town meeting without some guarantee that we'll be
Well, but we didn't,
changing
no,
the.
we said we were gonna change it. We didn't say when.
I think the reviews are independent, but even if it weren't, the town meeting approves it in June, the Attorney General rejects it, you come back in
Submit
October with
again.
the same article without the restriction done, it's done in October, is town meeting gonna go against itself and say, no, oh, we don't like it now because you removed the restriction that you said you were going to remove?
People are fickle.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, but I'm just saying, I think the reviews are independent, but logically, it wouldn't, that shouldn't occur, that you approved it in the end of April, saying that we're gonna remove the restriction. Now we've removed the restriction because the Attorney General said we had to. now you're not going to approve it? That's not, it's not logical.
Yeah.
That would happen.
And so what they have in that instance is you have a vote without the change being made. You submitted it within the 60-day requirement, but you've waited to do that. And if they reject it, you simply go to fall and say, okay, I've got the same article, and now we're changing the agreement, and we're going to submit it before the deadline.
Yep.
We're 8-9 months further down the road.
They've spent the money.
They've spent the money. Yeah.
Done the foundation. Now it's not changing.
Yeah,
We'll take off our restrictions.
Yeah, I think waiting as long as possible and saying, okay, fine, tell us we have to get it done when we'll get it done before our deadline. But there's a deadline for a reason. Doesn't mean we have to have it submitted and changed prior to that deadline. It means deadline.
Can I ask another question? So last night, I'm sorry I didn't watch the meeting. Was there a consensus among the planning board, or are they somewhat flummoxed as a group? I mean, I'm not flummoxed, but, are they as, what's happening with the planning board in of itself?
So after a lot of discussion and frustration, I think we're all aligned with the path forward, but we're at different levels of certainty and comfort with the path forward. I think that's where everyone's differing.
And so the united path forward is that you would go for the builder to do the exception with the possibility, which you find to be a very small possibility, that it could entail 72 other units. 70 or whatever. 77
That seems highly unlikely.
units.
Because he would have to also upgrade his poop management.
Oh, his sewer.
It
Yeah.
depends on the current capacity.
That's basically what your path
Yeah,
forward
the,
is.
the differing opinions is the timing of the town meeting vote.
I see.
We're not really sure if we want to do it this town meeting, a special town meeting, fall town meeting. We're still wrestling with that timing.
And quite frankly, the people in charge of the agreement with the private developer is the select board. And so the select board has to have that conversation, decide whether or not they want to proceed that way, and then would have to go and make the adjustment to that agreement. And again, the developer's not going to say no, because it's just taking less restrictions off of them.
Never say never, because the way this whole thing has been.
That's true.
Just
They could say, you know what, we're happy with that agreement, we don't want to change it. And it's unilateral, so you guys can't.
Yeah.
So was a representative from the select board at your meeting last night, and did they offer any, and did whomever was possibly there offer any thoughts in the conversation?
She was there, but she did not offer thoughts because she did not want to speak for the board.
They have not had a discussion on that, in that
Right.
capacity,
Well,
and
yeah.
therefore, preserving the
But
board
I
would be, yeah, no, I
didn't know
understand.
if the person, Virginia, apparently, added to the conversation or asked questions or.
She was certainly taking a lot of notes.
Okay.
Any other further discussion? Any questions for Chris? Any questions for our NIMCOG representative?
Well, I guess, can I ask what your thoughts are about their path that they perceive?
When you're saying your thoughts, are you speaking to Kelly or to
I'm
Chris?
talking to the lady here.
Kelly?
From NEMCOG. Kelly?
Hi, yeah. So, I'm sorry, can you clarify the question?
So, Chris has articulated that as a board, they've gone forward on this path of having the builder accept a change with the very remote possibility that there could be an extra 77 units built there. And I was wondering what your perception of that forward path
Sure.
is.
Well, I guess I don't know enough about the proposal that is under construction right now to really know what could possibly change. I mean, I do know that once you go through design and you have a certain sewer capacity that you're designing on site, it may be a little bit more challenging to change that. But again, I can't really speak to that because I don't have that information in front of me. What I do know is that HLC on our call with them seemed as though if the development agreement was amended in order to not restrict the capacity in the way that it currently does, so it would basically by unlocking that, you would basically have any development on that site subject to the zoning. So it would still have a capacity, it would just be a slightly higher capacity. It seemed that if that is amended and if the select board is amenable to amending it, then the zoning would be in compliance.
All right. Any further questions?
Just want to summarize, so if the developer can develop to the 15, but may decide not to, but they're all okay because it's developed, the zoning says 15.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good luck with that at town meeting.
Yeah, I agree. Could go anywhere.
Good evening, Evan Blansky, Director of Community Development. If you recall, Trimble Crow could have proposed 15 units an acre. They voluntarily proposed it at 13 units an acre. The zoning that the planning board and town meeting was contemplating was always going to be 15 units an acre by right.
Yes, but there was a lot of discussion and a lot of compromise between Trammell Crow and the town and the community that came to speak to that. So I think to blanketly say that they could have done that, that's great.
No,
But would that have led to them actually getting a development agreement in place and approval of how we're proceeding currently? So I think it's nice to say that would have happened, but I don't think we can blanketly say that.
Their original proposal was 13 units per acre. There was no negotiation on density. It's just, the more we talk about it, I think the more logistically and the unknown, the concerns related to the unknown or the likelihood that Trimble Crow would take action on modifying their proposal, I think that becomes clearer. And I think what Paul suggested is exactly what I suggested last night at Planning Board. Stay the course, and between now and May 1st or 2nd town meeting, as Planning Board talks to FinCom, talks to Select Board, they can further articulate their strategy and explain in a much more detailed manner and intelligent manner related to the likelihood of a risk and the unknowns. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. The more we talk about it, the more in focus the level of that small to no risk becomes clearer. And I think that's pretty critical here.
Are there limitations to what, if they really could construct there? I mean, there's the storage facility that they're going to build, is that?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that the wastewater treatment plant that they designed and had approved by DEP is designed for the proposal, the specific proposal. There's not excess capacity in that system.
That's my point.
Right. There's a variety of developer constraints, never mind physically trying to find a location for another building foundation.
I mean, what's the real risk that they'd want to build another 77 units?
I think you really have to ask them.
Well, I think we should.
What I'm suggesting is they could have built it 50 units an acre.
So maybe that's the next, but that's a good point. Maybe that's the next step. We meet with the select board. If they're agreeable to going down this path, because we still have to talk to them, find out if they're agreeable. And then maybe we talk to, because we still have to, the developer too still has to agree to this, right?
Yep.
So then we have to talk to them.
They have to come to the conversation no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the planning board goes to them, or Evan can go to them, and we get a conversation with them. And they say, we're good with it as is,
Yep.
then we can go to town meeting and say, okay, we spoke to them.
With much more certainty and answers to those questions that are
Right.
going to come up during town meeting.
Yes.
Let me ask you another question. Is there any water restriction in that area in terms of additional capacity?
So that's a great question. It's another example where their permit with the North Chelmsford Water District is very specific. There was significant off-site mitigation required, as well as capacity impact fees. So again, adding 70 units, that requires them to go back to Chelmsford DPW, requires them to go back to Chelmsford Water District, and they're going to be paying additional capacity and impact fees. Never mind the stretch code and all the other costs associated with making a modification
Which
of
we
that
could even,
significance.
we could even make difficult if we wanted to, could we not? I'm sorry.
No, but that brings to mind the other issue. One of the reasons they pulled the building permits for all of the units at this time is they did not want to be subject to the July 1 stretch code.
Stretch code?
Because that is a significant financial impact on the project to meet those new energy requirements.
Yeah, so if we're not amending this agreement until after that
That's a good point.
July 1, I think that's a great incentive not to do so.
Exactly.
Good point.
Okay. All right, I think it all boils down to, as it stands right now, there's still a few answers that need to be ironed out. I don't think we'll be out voting on this later this evening, but we'll certainly delay our vote until such time as we're able to do so. Any other questions for our presenter or for our NENCOM representative?
Thanks for doing it.
All right. Chris, thank you very much. Kelly, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well.
No good deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unpunished.
All right.
That's for sure.
We had on the agenda a review of Article 27, which is the citizens petition to vote basically against what was just presented.
We almost argued for her anyway.
Well, yeah.
Pretty much.
Thought did cross my mind.
It didn't it? Yeah. I have communicated with her. She was unable to come this evening, and had asked either the 11th or the night of town meeting or some other time in between. Given that I don't think we intend to vote on the other article this evening, I think delaying that to a future date for review, she would like the ability to speak on it, I think is something that we will do. Right now, we have an opportunity for public comment. We usually have this end of the meeting, but before voting on recommendations, always allow for a public comment at this time. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in public comment before we proceed?
Do we have new business? We don't have any business on this, do we?
I'm going to join you.
No. Then I would actually entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess before we begin our voting.
So moved.
So moved.
All right, all's in favor?
Aye.
All right, 5-minute recess.
Get some water.
Probably not bad.
Back. All right. All right, we're back from our session. A brief break in our session. And so now in our agenda is our time to review, discuss, and vote on recommendations for the fiscal year 25 budget and Springtime meeting warrant articles. So let me bring up the current articles here.
There you go. There you go. Here it is.
Okay.
Oh, simple.
And so our first article is simply report of town officers. We take no action on that. And we go to Article 2. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 2 as written.
Second.
I second, okay, thank you.
All right, discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 3.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 3 for the town to raise and appropriate $4,037,071 to fund the town's fiscal year 2025 assessment to the Neshoba Valley Technical School District.
I second it.
Discussion?
Gotta go home tonight.
In line with previous years. Good presentation.
Excellent presentation.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, 7 in favor. Article 4.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 4 for the town to raise and appropriate $73,880,000 to defray charges for the operations of the Chelmsford Public Schools for the fiscal period July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
7 in favor. No abstentions or nays. Article 5.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 5, General Government Fiscal Year 2025 Operating Budget as written. Unless you'd like me to read it.
No? Do you have a second?
Second.
You can choose, Pam. I'm not sure who came first.
I don't care.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? None. 7 in favor. Article 6.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 6, Finance Committee Reserve Fund, that the town raise and appropriate $400,000 to be used as a reserve fund at the discretion of the Finance Committee for fiscal year 2025, as provided in General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 6.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 7.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 7, fiscal year 25 capital budget, appropriate $5,883,402 for the following capital projects, as written.
Second.
Discussion? Nothing here that should be coming off, and a lot more that should be on here if we had the available funds. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? No. 7 in favor. Article 8.
One
Hey,
second. I'm getting there.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 8, Parker Middle School feasibility study, As written.
A second?
Second.
Discussion?
So that-
I'm gonna abstain because I don't know what's happening.
So when superintendent was here, they didn't have the number, but now that's the number?
Yes. 1.8 million feasibility study, and it's the first step in the, well, the first step was application and acceptance, but now the next step in the MSBA process.
Yeah, is there any detail to the number? I mean, with can I have something where I would know what $1.8 million is all about?
Finance, yes. Dr. Lang reached out to the MSBA. He and I were on a conference call with the MSBA late this morning regarding the feasibility study and the project eligibility status. This number is a solid estimate based upon the cost of relative recent projects, as well as the expectation of what it's going to take to do the study for the town of Chelmsford. And our reimbursement rate will be just over 52% for this cost at this time. So yes, it's a number that the MSBA seemed comfortable with. Jave was comfortable with in terms of, like I said, reaching out to other communities who have recently done studies. And it's a conservative number, Dave. The last thing we want to do is have to come back and ask for more money to do this. But it will not be contracted with until calendar year 25. So what'll happen is we will be before the MSBA in February of 25, and then following that meeting of the MSBA, we would then contract with the project manager, and then contract with the state as a partner to do the designer selection. And then they don't contemplate a vote prior till there will not be a vote. They've told us prior to July of 2026. So you're probably looking at perhaps at fall town meeting in 2026 for a vote. So it's out there, but it's the best projection on what we see for these projects in terms of a time frame. Yes.
Did you say, now, are they going to reimburse us
52% of this cost.
the
Even if it
1.8?
fails, in other words, if
Yeah.
we go do the feasibility study and the town says, we're not doing this, we will get reimbursed just over 52%
So basically, this is really 900,000 at the end of the day.
net cost to the town, yes.
Okay, because the
And
1.8
And it would be
looks
borrowed, it'll be
fancier.
borrowed as well.
875.
Does it have to be done right this second, or is there any time?
It has to be done by the end of the calendar year, just like the MSBA zoning.
My only reason is interest rates might be going down.
Oh, we're not going, no, let's make it clear, we're not going to borrow this money
I'm saying what we-
until next year.
Okay.
But we have to have the vote of approval.
Okay.
No, we're not gonna borrow money now at 5%, when a
Right.
year from now it could be 4%. So this money would not be borrowed until probably June of 2025.
Thank you.
So a year from,
Thank
yeah,
God
about a
we
year
have
from
that
now.
AAA rating, because we
So-
get. Good job. Fantastic. This is when it's important, when the interest rates are high.
I am wondering if
Like,
we're going
I know, they're very
This
high.
is when it really counts.
Agree.
I tried to borrow some money saying I was from the town of Chelmsford, so I wanted.
No,
they wouldn't do it.
no. Did you tell me you were on the fence?
Jim, I made the motion, nobody seconded.
A second.
No one seconded?
Nobody seconded.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Discussion?
I think we just had it.
Well, we had a question. We had a question during the motion. We've had a second, now we can discuss our positions on it.
I hope that everything goes smoothly and that in my lifetime, there's a brand-new school in Chelmsford. That's all I'm going to say.
Maybe one of my kids will go through the school, who knows?
Would that be great?
It would be
Maybe
great.
my grandkids would.
I'm
go
not
through
sure it's
it.
gonna happen. Might be grandkids, yeah.
I'll be dead.
That could be two, who knows? Yeah.
There's no guarantees here.
Chase Middle School, I like it.
Usually something I'd
That's
say.
it.
It is, yeah, well, you know.
You should do it, Dave.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
So I can't see not voting to at least take that next step.
Yes, agreed.
Absolutely.
Yes, before the state decides to stop funding 50% on these school projects, I think we better get it.
The question is it pulling the fourth graders, what happens to the, like, right now, seventh, eighth is one,
So there's so to answer that question, there's a study, the study is going to determine whether or not it's a 5-6, and whether or not to pull fourth grade out of the 4 elementary schools to make it a 4-5-6, but I believe the anticipation is to keep McCarthy as a 7-8, regardless of what happens here.
Yeah, the feasibility study requires to explore all options, and the 3 possible options are the 2 that he described: 5-6, simple replacement of Parker, 5-6; 4-5-6, meaning pull the fourth grade out of the elementary schools, or 5-8, which would then surplus McCarthy for use, which is not going to happen.
Yeah.
No.
but we have to do those 3 exercises.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions?
abstention. I just don't understand it well enough.
Sure. 6 in favor, 1 abstention. And just as a note, you don't have to say why you're abstaining.
I don't care. I'll
That's
say-
the beauty of an abstention.
I just started. I wasn't
Yep,
there.
and I'm letting you know.
Just-
But happy to understand why. Article 9.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 9, fiscal year 2025 Sewer Enterprise Fund operating budget as written.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, 7 in favor. Article 10.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 10, Kensington Road Sewer Pump Station as written.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? None, 7 in favor. Article 11.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 11 Sewer Flush Truck as written.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 12.
I make a motion to recommend approval Article 12 fiscal year 2025 Stormwater Management Enterprise Fund as written.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? None, 7 in favor. Article 13.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 13 Stormwater Camera Truck as written.
Second.
Discussion? Just for the record, that's $340,000 for the purchase. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, 7 in favor. Article 14.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 14 fiscal year 2025 Forum Ice Rink Enterprise Fund, that the town appropriates $65,000 in expenses to operate the Chelmsford Forum Ice Rink Enterprise Fund for fiscal year 2025, and that $65,000 be raised from Chelmsford Forum Ice Rink Enterprise Fund revenues.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? None, 7 in favor. Article 15.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 15, fiscal year 2025 PEG Access and Cable-Related Enterprise Fund, as written, for the total of $583,680.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Nope, 7 in favor. Article 16.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 16, fiscal year 2025 PEG Access Television Computer Servers and Equipment, as written.
Second.
Discussion? Just for the record, it's $39,284 for the computer server camcorder package and telecommunications equipment, and it's $18,500 for the retained earnings for the purchase of cameras, microphones, encoders, and telecommunications equipment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, 7 in favor. Article 17.
Make a motion to recommend approval of Article 17, fiscal year 2025 Golf Course Enterprise Fund operating budget, the town appropriate $30,000 in expenses to operate the golf course enterprise for fiscal year 2025, and that $30,000 be raised from golf course enterprise revenues.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 18.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 18, annual appropriation of departmental revolving funds. Do you want me to read?
As presented.
As presented.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any nays or abstentions? None, 7 in favor. Article 19.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 19, Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund, for the town to transfer $60,000 from the sale of graves and lots to Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 20.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 20, Community Action Program Fund, that the town raise and appropriate $10,000 to fund the Community Action Program established under Article 12 of the warrant for the April 29, 1996 Spring Annual Town Meeting to provide matching funds to community improvement projects undertaken by individuals and/or organizations within the town of Chelmsford.
Second?
Discussion? Have we seen an increase in or do we know if we've seen an increase in applications again to this program? I know that there was a lull during COVID.
It's been relatively quiet.
Relatively quiet. Okay. All right, I think reaching back out to the scouts and things like that, I think, because I know that was a big funding when I was around, big funding for that. Okay.
You can reach out to the chairman of that committee.
Sure, just to see if there's been any outreach to different groups and organizations that this is really is a helpful fund for things like that. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 21.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 21, Property Valuation Services, for the town to transfer $80,000 from overlay surplus to fund property valuation services pertaining to the town of Chelmsford fiscal year 2026 5-year property valuation certification by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
One
Any-
abstention.
6 in favor, 1 abstention. Article 22.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 22, Community Preservation Fund fiscal year 25 debt service, admin, expenses, and reserves, as written.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 23.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 23, Community Preservation Fund, Forefathers Cemetery Headstone Preservation, for the town to transfer $8,000 from the Community Preservation Fund General Reserve for the preservation of headstones at Forefathers Cemetery.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 24.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 24, Community Preservation Fund, West Chelmsford Cemetery Post and Rail Fence, for the town to transfer $40,000 from the Community Preservation Fund General Reserve for the purchase and installation of a post and rail fence at the West Chelmsford Cemetery.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Nays or abstentions? 7 in favor. Article 25.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 25, effective military services on salary, seniority, and leave allowances of town employees, that the town accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 33, Section 59, regarding the effective military service on salary, seniority, and leave allowances of town employees.
Second?
Discussion?
I just want to make sure I understand it. This means if somebody is called to service, they continue to accrue seniority because it wasn't their big idea to be called into service.
Yes.
Oh, then I'm all for it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none. 7 in favor. All right. Article 26, I believe we're taking no action on unless someone would like to take action and make a motion. I think it's premature at this point. Same with Article 27. So that brings us to the end of the articles and budget for this Springtown meeting. Let's move next in our agenda to the review of the reporting schedule. So we do have 2 articles which we do not have a recommendation on currently. Oh, that says fall annual town meeting. You just want to update that last slide.
Save the date.
Save the day, yeah. Yeah, so so town meeting is going to be April 28th? No, 29th. Yeah, Monday the 29th. We typically have it the week before or earlier or more advanced for our reporting. We certainly want to have everything done for the pre-town meeting, which is the Wednesday preceding town meeting. But let's talk briefly about Articles 26 and 27. So I think the intention, what we heard, is it's April 8th potentially for a meeting, and then further discussion after that. I don't know when the planning board will feel comfortable that they have a presentable article. So I think that's kind of in the air for us right now. And given the fact that we do have a reporting schedule, I think it's a wait and see, but plan on posting a meeting for the night of town meeting to vote on those 2 articles.
We're having a pre-town meeting?
So the pre-town meeting is a presentation. It's the town manager's session, if you will.
Right, okay, so.
And I would recommend anyone that is a representative in the town, especially new representatives, attend that meeting. There's an opportunity to ask questions, to go through all the articles. It's a very good presentation that's given by the proponents of different articles, and mainly the town. And it's an opportunity to get more information in preparation for making a vote at town meeting. So for people that still don't know about it or don't attend, it's a great resource that's offered by a town manager and his staff to really make sure that we're prepared to make our votes on town meeting and really to help possibly streamline the process the night of town meeting. So we definitely want to have our handbook ready before that. So as far as the Articles 26 and 27 are concerned, we might be able to call a meeting between now and then, depending on where we land as far as a presentable article.
So if we're meeting on the 8th with the select board, the planning board.
Planning board is, yeah.
Meeting on the 8th with the select board. We could, at that meeting, decide where we're going to go and whether or not we would want to come in here on the 11th, right, to present?
Yes, theoretically.
That'll give us enough
yes,
time for us to post for the FinCom.
I would, yes. The Tuesday prior is posting for our Thursday night meeting. So that would theoretically give us enough time to post for that night. So we could potentially hold that as a date.
Let's hold it as a date.
Yeah.
And we'll let you, the planning board will let us, we'll
Yeah.
let the guys
And it
know.
is, it's a second Thursday in the month, so it's not going to conflict with the Board of Appeals, which is good. I'll reserve.
Just so you know, when we met with Dr. Lang, he said if we were ever in a bind as far as, rooms, we could meet in.
Certainly meet at his,
Yes.
yes. Yeah. So we'll reserve here. I think we can still. I don't think there's anything in the room that evening, because when I initially reached out, I'd asked for, I think, this room to be reserved for the 11th, just in case we needed it.
Okay.
And I'll reach back out to Telemedia, Kurt, you make note, that we'll at least get the Zoom information ready so that we have it available to go on the 11th. So let's hold that as a tentative date at 6:30 for those 2 articles, and then Those, if we meet that night, we could theoretically get that vote into the book. It'd be a tight crunch, but it would still allow us the opportunity to get our 2 notes on that, as long as everything else is done ahead of time, Pam.
Yeah, the only issue would be what you want to put in the letter, because I can easily put in the.
You can easily put that stuff in. Yeah, no, I think would give us, 2 days, maybe, to get that information in. But I think it's doable, especially if it's just those 2 articles we're dealing with. So, let's hold that right now, but we'll plan on, Pam, whenever the rest of it's ready, you can send it out to us. I'll put some of my sights on next week. We're starting to work on the letter. There were no non-unanimous votes, and I say non-unanimous because there are a couple of abstentions, but they don't count toward the total. So I don't anticipate needing any comment on why someone voted a certain way on the articles we just voted on. But if you'd like to contribute, I will definitely accept any language you'd like to add to the letter, and then we'll recirculate that and get that together. So the 11th we'll hold as a target, and then knowing that if we can't do the 11th, that we may have to hold a meeting at the senior center prior to town meeting. I don't like to do that, but it is an option. So that's discussion of plans for upcoming meeting as well. Any further public comment? Seeing none in the room and none in the Zoom room. There's no press. I said I was going to take it off. I still haven't done it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night.
Can I sign